everybody. Welcome back to Path to Recovery Podcast, episode 32 today, Breaking Free from Codependence. Before we get into the podcast, please like, subscribe, and favorite this podcast so you can receive notifications of any of my new shows. And please, by all means, share it with someone you know that could possibly benefit from it because it may be the catalyst that ends up changing their lives. Now, we're going to cut to the chase here. Codependence is created by our inner belief that we're somehow empty or feeling a lack of something. Therefore, we try to find something to fill the emptiness. And if that something doesn't work, we try to find something else to fix it. Our relationships with those somethings becomes our addictions. The more we fail to find the fix, the more we try finding something else to fix us. Recognize this though, people. We're not just talking drugs and alcohol. They just happen to be the most widely known forms of addiction. We're talking about things like getting into another unhealthy relationship, or maybe overeating, or becoming a recluse, all by yourself and not doing anything. Or maybe needing to always vent to your family and friends, and that seems to be all you do is vent. Or maybe you tend to blame everybody else. When we dissect our internal issues to the core, we'll find out where our codependence is actually hiding. And not surprisingly, folks, the most destructive and addictive dependence is actually with people. So let me ask you a few questions and you'll kind of see where I'm going. Do you like to be alone? If you're actually being honest with yourself, you'll no doubt say no. We like our relationships and our family. Well, mostly. We really dig the feelings we get when we have someone to hug or kiss. And we revel in the feelings we have when someone actually tells us that they love us. How about this? Do you like having no friends? Again, folks, if you're being honest with yourself, you'll most likely say no. It's not likely that you could take a whole week or more and not talk to one of your friends or connect socially with them. Do you like to share stuff or chat on social media? I don't even have to ask. I know exactly what the answer is. There are very few people on this planet that don't have some sort of social app for something or another. And believe it or not, I can actually back that up with some statistics I just found today. From a site called Statista.com. In 2020, it's estimated that over 3.3 billion people use social media. Just to give you a perspective, everybody, Earth's total population is just under 7.6 billion. That means almost half of the world uses social media. That's just insane. Anyway, back to business. Another question. Do you stay with your abusive boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, or wife because you don't want to be alone? This one's simply a matter of feeling a lack of self-worth. And that's usually most likely due to some sort of childhood experience with either family or friends where you may have felt like you were left alone or not included because you weren't worthy of it. Maybe you were always the last person to be picked in sports. Do you curse in front of your kids or your friends, family, or even coworkers? Some people I know strongly believe that it's simply how we communicate now. It's the new age, the new era of communication. The truth is, folks, it's really a lack of concern for the people around us. I'm not saying that we shouldn't swear, but that if we want to have it as a part of our communication, we should be aware of when it's appropriate and when it's not. And unless you want your kids to cuss at their grandparents, your friends, their school teachers, you might want to release the dependence on using those words in front of your kids. Here's another question. Do you need to have all those cars, ATVs, houses, dogs, cats, toys? Why do you have them in the first place? If you were to really dig down deep to find the reason why you want them, you may find that you felt a lack of either belonging or lacking in love from your parents and vowed that you would never do that to yourself or your family when you grew up. And you believe that it's necessary to have all that stuff in order to be considered happy or successful. Yeah, sometimes it sucks to see the real truth behind our desire to have stuff. I'm not saying it's bad to have stuff. It just has a deeper meaning than just having toys. How about this? Do you feel you need your connection for your next fix? We're addicts and we need to have our next injection, our next snort, our next drink, our next smoke, whatever it is. We can try to blame it on the chemical addictive qualities of all of them. But in truth, everyone, somewhere along the way, we actually chose to walk down that dark road. But you get the idea. All these questions are kind of giving you the obvious scenario. Now, if we were in a state of balance, maybe we were sober, very calm, we had a really decent life going on, we had our act together, we were in a true state of happiness with ourselves, those things that we've just talked about wouldn't be necessary at all. We wouldn't need something outside of ourselves to make ourselves happy. We're caught up in such deep dysfunction that we either just ride the wave and see where it leads us, or we believe that it's just too damn hard to stop it. Or maybe we believe that we need to have those things in order to stay sane. Now, the definition of codependence from Wikipedia is going to read this. Codependency is a behavioral condition in a relationship where one person enables another person's addiction, poor mental health, immaturity, irresponsibility, or underachievement. What I'm trying to show you is that it doesn't require a relationship with someone to make it a codependence. It can actually be a relationship with a substance or stuff. I suppose we have to kind of clarify the definition of a relationship. Maybe that'll help you understand what I'm really getting at. Everyone will tell you that a relationship is with another person. That's just one aspect of the definition. There's a thing called the Oxford Languages. There's a website out there, and they define a relationship as the following. A relationship is the way in which two or more concepts, objects, or people are connected or being connected. Okay? We just use our default definitions when we hear a word out of context. Meaning, if I told you that a special cog and a spoke have a relationship in making a clock work, you'd probably get it. You'd figure out that the two pieces work together in order for the entire clock to work. And if one of those fail to work, then it's a good chance the clock's going to fail to work. So that's just saying relationships aren't just with two people. So how do we break free from codependence? Now that's really a heck of a question. I'm going to try to answer that for you in a few steps. First off, it's kind of like everything I've talked about in all my podcasts about healing. We have to recognize what our own codependencies are. This concept of recognition is pretty critical in healing anything. So we have to recognize what our codependencies are. We then need to acknowledge the attachment we have to them. What is it about this thing that we believe we need to have in our lives? This part is probably the toughest aspect of dealing with codependencies. It's very much the same as hearing an alcoholic admit to being an alcoholic. That's probably the hardest step to take, is that first step. It takes a deep desire to heal before we decide we can admit to such a thing. It works exactly the same for healing our codependencies, though. It's also the exact same thing we have to do to heal anything we struggle with. We have to recognize we have a problem or a need to heal before we can even start fixing or healing our problems. So let's work on an example to see what I'm trying to get at. I'm going to give you an example with an issue of mine. It's probably going to be more than one issue involved in it, but it's something that I've had to work through over the decades. When I was in my last marriage, it was a pretty destructive home life. We were two drinkers and we had some really big egos and seemed like we both wanted to control everything. We had two children, and for some crazy reason, once our first child was born, we couldn't seem to agree on how to raise our kids, even though it was like a topic of conversation for years before we had any. I mean, as soon as we knew that we were pregnant and expecting, we spent hours and hours talking about what our plans were. And we always seemed to agree on all of it before having our first child. But funny how time changes things. I ended up going through my darkest times towards the end of that relationship. I was so deep that I had to make life-altering changes to survive. And for everyone else to survive. Yeah, it was that bad for me. It had gotten so bad that wedding rings were thrown, cursing in front of the kids, calling each other names, punching walls, insane amount of drinking, emotional, verbal abuse. It took everything I had in my being not to throw in physical abuse along the way, though I may have received some along the way as well. I want to make this next part very clear to you all. There were times that I actually checked out. What I mean by that was I was found in our basement once by my mother in what she called a coma. I was apparently unresponsive to anything they tried doing. I had blackouts, not from alcohol, just emotionally giving up. I began deep contemplation of suicide, not because I was giving up on life, but because I knew if I let things continue the way they were going, I might kill somebody. So I knew it would be the best that I'd be the one to die if someone had to. And that was my brain thought back then. If somebody had to die, it might as well be me, or it needs to be me. I ended up plotting and planning how and when I was going to go through with it. I had alternate plans and subalternate plans. If this doesn't happen, I'll do this. And if that doesn't quite do it, I'll do this to make sure it does. Funny thing was, the more I thought and planned, the more comfortable it actually began to feel. That's part of the hook that depression has. That's a codependency dysfunction. I was securely ingrained into a depression. If I wasn't thinking about how to kill myself, I'd consider it a bad day. The day I decided to end everything was a calm and beautiful day. Not just outside, but inside me. Everything was at peace. It was as if that moment arrived and I could take the weight off my shoulders. I actually chose to stop by to see probably the three most important people in my life, and my desire was to say goodbye. One was a best friend, the other was my mother, and the last one was one of my older sisters. And it was pretty much in that order. I told my mom and my best friend nothing of my plans, but my best friend had a feeling they knew something was not right, and she became very worried about me. But I assured her and my mother that everything was going to work out perfectly. I then stopped to see my sister, and her workplace was directly in line logistically with where I was looking to end my life. So it seemed very apropos that I stopped to see her last. After a few conversations and opening up to her, I was telling her that I was checking out. Obviously, she got very worried, but she asked me to talk to this woman at her job, and she asked if I could just wait a minute. That minute that I waited was actually the catalyst I needed to dig out of my dark night of the soul. I've talked about that scenario in some of my other podcasts, but obviously I'm here talking about it now, so everything did work out perfectly. What I'm trying to get at is that I was so stuck in codependence, thinking I needed someone in my life to make me happy and complete. I didn't concern myself with being a happy person within. My wife became that thing I thought I needed in order to be happy. I wasn't happy being myself with myself. I didn't believe that I was worthy of anything. I didn't deserve a healthy relationship. I didn't think I was good enough for anyone. And the universe responded in kind with, and so it is. I manifested the exact thing I believed I was needing. It's a funny thing how our human life will present us with the exact matches to our wounds. I suppose I needed to be a little clearer on what exactly I was looking for. But then again, apparently I did just that. I got what I asked for. So, how was I able to break free from my codependence? Well, the first part was that I left my family, my home, my job, my friends. I left everything to try and figure out what I was all about. I was placed in a cognitive awareness program for 12 straight weeks, 8 hours per day, with no outside influences. This was so I could focus on healing me first and foremost. When my program was done, I then had to confront my wife and to address my weaknesses with her. Talk about opening yourself up. It's like, all right, I'm going to the wolves. Let me see if I can cut a wound, give them the scent of blood. Ultimately, it was about 3 months after my program was done, I had to return to another 12 weeks, as I had several breakdowns at home trying to cope with my wife and my life. One of those moments included that coma incident. Now, it was after I completed the second go-round in the cognitive program that I made a hard choice to tell my wife that I wanted a divorce and that I didn't want to be with her anymore. For years after the divorce, our communications were just plain ugly at best. And I felt like she would do anything to provide me with painful experiences, looking externally. Yeah, guess who learned a hard lesson? I know it wasn't the truth, but it certainly felt like it at times. I then decided the best way to survive the non-codependence relationship with her was to simply focus on raising my 2 sons the best that I could. And I put my best foot forward to do just that. I also did everything I could to make sure she and I were able to communicate better, and with as little animosity as possible. We had to try and somehow clean the slate and just understand that, look, it isn't about you and me anymore. It's about these two kids. If we expect them to be better than us or grow up happier than we appeared to be together, then we have to put our best feet forward together, not separately and not me versus you. Now, to this day, we both know we did the right thing and that our kids have become very nice men in their adulthood. So we take pride in that. I then decided, after that marriage was done and a couple of years go by, I decided that relationships with someone else needed to go on the back burner until I felt I was ready. I'd refused to even date anyone for something like 2 years. But that healing didn't happen as planned. All my friends were telling me I needed to date someone. Now, I didn't think I was ready, but then again, I apparently still needed some internal healing due to the common insecurities and the lack of worthiness issues I was still holding on to. My next few relationships were filled with a similar fate. You know, a lot of arguing, a lot of noise, nobody being happy. Yet, they were never as intense as my last marriage was. So I learned to take the lessons from my marriage and each of those relationships I was in after that. And I learned to seek better outcomes. Not a better woman to be with, but a healthier me to be with the woman I was with. This process of learning quickly became a staple for me, and I gained a lot of insight over the next, 12, 13 years. Yeah, it has been a long learning curve for me, but hey, learning is a lifetime experience. So just about maybe 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, after several kicks in the groin, I met a woman that had something different in her being that I caught on to. She had God in her life. I'm not saying I didn't. It's just that she made sure I was aware of it right from the get-go. It became a friendship of honesty and trust. We made sure we talked about everything in our past, and we talked deeply about every possible experience we had gone through to get us to where we were that day. All the healings and lessons, all the ugliness, the dark nights of the souls, all of our dark, deepest, ugliest experiences. We brought those all to the table and put it out there. I finally found someone I could trust to open myself to. Someone who would openly listen and who would probably hold me when I needed to be held. And to let me go when I needed to go. So once I found that trust, I found that honesty. Not just her honesty, but mine. Through daily talks and healings for both of us, we managed to build a dynamic relationship that had us respecting each other for what we were, not what we had or didn't have or status or what we looked like. We accepted the truth that we would be together as long as our forever would take us. We had clear understanding of who we are as individuals first, and as a couple second. We also walked the path to God. That was the most important catalyst in my life. I was able to get back to God after all these years. I always had God with me each time I chose not to kill myself, or cause harm to others, or to not pull the trigger, or when I saw my first son being born, or when I got to deliver my second son, or when I had been kicked down hundreds of times before I was able to meet my spiritual partner, my love, my best friend. It's also the most important thing about our relationship. It's simple. It's God first, then me, then others. See, folks, if we don't put God first, we can't be the best human to share anything with anyone. We can't be a good parent if God and us aren't good. If I'm not a good parent, my children will reflect it. If I don't commune with God and connect with God, the product around me reflects all of that. My connection to God has always been there. I just fought tooth and nail to refuse its assistance. But I also didn't need to fight, as it gave me guidance every day. I just had such a hard time seeing it for decades. Now, today, I see those moments. But more importantly, I share those moments with as many people as I can, trying to share God's light with every action I take. Be the example, being the best human I can be while I'm here on earth, providing healing assistance to anyone who calls for it, to share all the gifts and my tools that I have, that I've gained, my wisdom to anyone in need. I'm right now living in a less than poverty level financially, but I'm the happiest being I've ever been. I'm at peace, giving money to those in need, giving clothes to those in need, paying it forward any chance I get, or just paying for someone else's stuff while they're at the register fumbling over their credit card or do they have enough cash. I'll just do it because it's the right thing to do. Now, Did I break free from that codependence? Absolutely. Was it easy? Not even close. Was it worth the time and effort? Unquestionably. Absolutely. 100%. And I highly recommend it. I've come so far that I've created a program called Cognitive Awareness with a Touch of God. It's accompanied by a podcast of the same name that's also available on all podcast apps, just like this podcast is. Those two podcasts work hand in hand to assist anyone willing to take the time and effort to heal, as well as this podcast, The Path to Recovery. So with that, folks, I'm going to end the podcast. I really greatly honor you. I appreciate your time and energy. I love you. I hope you continue to listen to my podcast and you can get something out of it. God bless you all. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you soon.